Hello, I'm Kate Mellor, and 25 years ago I invented Robert Pinnacle and took him around the spa towns of Europe. I'd always been quite interested in the work of Ingrid Pollard, who'd done a piece of work called Histories, where she'd taken items from a museum and just wrote a complete fabricated story about it. And so I thought, well, I'll maybe do something a bit like that, but I'll invent a bogus artist and create a story, and I'll invent myself as his kind of follower and do work that I follow in his footsteps, and I'll write his bogus stories, and people kind of believed in him. It was quite fun doing it, but spa towns do have their horrible side. There's a lot of sadness and grief and death and disease. There's a photograph that I took in Spa, the eponymous spa, that gave its name to all the spa towns. And everybody who stayed there, the monarchs, all the great and the good, the poets, musicians, the artists who made it, and they all have their names in gold. I put his name, Robert Pinnacle, it's a silly name, but that's what he was like. Nobody would think anything of it now, but back in the 90s they did. And I put Robert Pinnacle's name up there in the photograph, and people would say, oh then, but how did you do that? And he really does exist, which is the point. And I'd say, well, I did it with Photoshop, of course. And they'd say, oh, of course you did. And well, nobody would do that now because they'd be used to it. But then it was early days, and people would be totally phased. Like at the end of the show, people would be let in on the conceit, and I'd have a little strip which would say Robert Pinnacle was a made-up character, a fictional character, and there are a lot of people like him throughout history. And people would genuinely appreciate it, that he was a fictional character. I found that the interest in spa towns, it's never quite left me, and I'm always grateful to be asked to have gone on that project, particularly because that's when I discovered how to use a pinhole camera, which I've been using ever since. And what I particularly like about the pinhole camera is that people aren't frightened of it. Because people come up and ask me about it, because they know that I'm not going to put a pinhole photograph on Facebook or anything like that. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of conversations over the years because people aren't frightened of a little wooden box. You get a really beautiful hazy effect if you use a pinhole camera. I really like the fact that people disappear if they are in front of a pinhole camera, and a lot of people tend to walk in front of a pinhole camera because of the long time exposure. and in history people disappear. They fail to register, and people in front of the camera fail to register. They seem to come together. The ancient prehistory of photography with the camera and the history of the Spartans, they seem to meld in a way.